Hi everyone, so this is another quick episode of the Cradle Bytes. I'm Sima Atayim. I'm social media manager and content creator at The Cradle, and I'm joined by my colleague William Van Wagenen, who is a Cradle contributor and investigative journalist who is here with us in Lebanon for the time being. So a lot of things have happened since we did the last bite, and I think we're just gonna, give you guys a general picture of what's going on. Israel is carpet bombing regularly the southern suburbs of Beirut. Israel has started bombing without warning and is not issuing evacuation orders for every single area it is bombing. Yesterday, for the first time in a while, actually maybe the first time ever, central Beirut was bombed, and the office of a Hezbollah MP was hit, but so was a medical team of the Islamic Health Authority, and 7 paramedics were killed. And just to give you a picture of how worrying the situation is, according to the World Health Organization, 28 health sector workers have been killed in Lebanon in the past 24 hours. So they destroyed, part of a building. They killed paramedics. They also used white phosphorus, and there is a debate going online about that. Some are denying that happened, but we could all smell it. So last night, we could hear the constant bombing of Dahia, the southern suburb of Beirut, and we could smell the phosphorus that was used to hit central Beirut. Now, there's a lot more. Just to be clear, 1,974 people have been killed in Lebanon, including 127 children and 261 women since 8 October. Specifically, since September 23, 1,400 have been killed and over 1.2 million displaced. Now, just to put that into perspective, during the 2006 war, 1,300 in total were killed in 33 days. So we're hearing the drones above us nonstop. We are hearing the warplanes. We are hearing the bombing. And it looks like it's going to expand in scope. Yeah, William, what's the last few days been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, maybe people are interested to know kind of just what the day-to-day is like. But as you mentioned, the buzz of the drones is like constant. Today where I was walking, it was really, really loud. And then the bombing last night that you mentioned that was here in like central Beirut, I mean, most of the bombing has been in the southern suburb in Dahia. And a lot of people have been killed there and a lot of buildings destroyed. But in the meantime, a lot of people have left that part of the city due to the danger. And that's why in other parts of Beirut, especially in Hamra, near like the American University, there are just people everywhere. That part of the town, of the city, is just packed with people staying in schools, staying in the streets, in parks, churches, people just living under like highway underpasses, along the Corniche by the sea. So people have I mean, Dahia, there's still people there, but from what I understand, a lot of people have left, and that's why Hamra is so packed. But this strike last night was like right in the city center, and as I was going home, I passed through that same area just maybe a half an hour before the bombing hit. Just as the
Bashura area, right? The Bashura area.
Bashura area. So that's the question: is whether the bombings will expand to other parts of the city. I mean, everyone, just to avoid getting killed, has to kind of make these calculations, like where is it safe to be, where is it not safe to be. And so far, you could say to yourself, well, in Dahia, there's going to be strikes. We know that. But in other places, I'll be safe. But, again, that could change at any time. And last night is an indication that, really almost anywhere in Beirut, there's the chance for that. And, again, like you said, it just so many people have been killed just in the last 2 weeks. I mean, these are huge numbers of people. I met a guy just the other day who the residential building across from his was hit with an airstrike, and he said 4 of his neighbors were killed. There was a family of 10 living in that apartment. 4 of them were killed, and the other 6 survived, luckily, and they've all fled Dahia and have luckily found a place. I think they went all the way up to Tripoli, he said. So again, there are a lot of civilians being killed in these strikes, and we'll have to see kind of how much worse it's going to get. So it's this weird mix of like life seeming totally normal and fine, and then like at night there's now almost a routine of like the bombings start, and everyone, at least I am just like at home, looking through Telegram and looking at the news to see like where in the city is getting hit, and it's because the strikes are almost nightly now. That's just kind of becoming a routine. But again, it's this weird mix of normality versus this terrible, versus the bombing versus drones in the day, and so yeah, it's starting to get to people, I think.
Yeah, and look, this is it's an expansion and an escalation. Many people are now asking, are they going to bomb the airport? Are they not going to bomb the airport? Because the airport is in that same area of of southern Beirut. So we don't know about that also, because a few months ago we've seen them priming the public that there are weapons at Beirut airport, but then we had an Israeli official being like, oh no, there aren't any weapons. Anyway, there are so many displaced people who are not finding apartments to stay in. A lot of people, including myself, we've opened our houses up. The government isn't doing that much. Not many public places have opened up. A lot of people, they just, when we're trying to help them, they say, find us houses. We don't want food. We don't want water. We don't want medicine. Just find us houses. This escalation is going to continue. And meanwhile, there are these very fierce clashes on the southern border. Okay, with these attempts to enter and advance on several axes by Israeli elite military units. And we have also a field source told the Hezbollah affiliated media Al-Manar that since dawn today, the resistance fighters have been confronting these attempts to advance from several points in southern Lebanon with different weapons and IEDs, inflicting heavy losses on them. And they're using artillery shells and missiles. They are using IEDs, and they are targeting gatherings along the lines of advance and supply lines, like along the front edge inside the occupied territories. And they are achieving direct hits, and we're seeing a lot of, in the Israeli media, a lot of admitting to deaths, many deaths in the last 2 days, and of course several are covered up. And we are seeing footage of helicopters transporting the dead and wounded back and forth, and they have not advanced deep yet. They are being hit before they can advance. And in relation to Secretary General of Hezbollah, who was assassinated, the martyr Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, assassinating him is really, by doing that, be sure that the fighters will be fighting twice as ferociously as if they had not assassinated him. We have the Golani Brigade. There are injuries and deaths among the Golani Brigade and the elite Eagles unit. And let's not forget that there is also still bombing in the South Lebanon and in Eastern Lebanon, in Baalbek and in the Bekaa. And so these clashes are ongoing in several areas. Kfar Kila, Maroun al-Ras, Yarun, Aitarun, Udaisi. Tanks are being destroyed. The ambushes are ongoing, and they are very fierce. Very fierce. And, some people are like, oh, they're not even going to be able to come in. But that's underestimating the enemy. They probably will advance. They will come in, but they're going to have a very, very hard time. I can tell you that much. And this escalation comes, which we haven't talked about actually on Cradle Bytes. Well, the Iranian operation, the Iranian missile strikes, the Operation True Promise 2, which really, in the media they have really been downplaying this and portraying it as a humiliation for Iran and a failure and ineffective, when we could see with our own eyes, thanks to the people on the ground who filmed, whether from Jordan or from the occupied West Bank or many different places. It wasn't just settlers who were filming, but Palestinians. So many impacts. The Nevatim Air Base was getting hit hard. Like, we have this documented. There's more hits than interceptions, more impacts than interceptions, and they still have the nerve to say nothing happened. Now the Israeli media is starting to admit to some of that damage, but the Americans are still downplaying it. I don't know, what is your thought about Operation 2 Promise 2, which used actually the Fatah missile, the Fatah 1 hypersonic missile, and the Israelis are denying that a hypersonic ballistic missile was even used. What are your thoughts on the operation, which before I let you talk, were preceded by a crazy Tel Aviv dual shooting operation in the heart of Tel Aviv, just as the Iranian waves of missiles began. And Hamas claimed responsibility for that operation. And then all of a sudden, you know, the whole map was covered in sirens warnings. So what are your thoughts on this Iranian operation that is they are trying to downplay, and that now they are deliberating this Israel's response to, and they're trying to maybe calibrate that response, and maybe it won't be till after the Jewish New Year, and. So what are your thoughts on the Iranian missile attacks, which were much bigger than the ones back in April?
Well, I guess the first thing is to say is that, you know, a lot of people were getting concerned that Iran was not going to respond, and especially with the Iranian President Pezeshkian trying to open up the nuclear negotiations again while he was in New York for the UN. And then the assassination of Nasrallah came right on the heels of that. And so there was, you know, I think there was a lot of fear that maybe Iran was just going to back down and wasn't going to respond. So obviously the response was strong. And of course the Israelis, it's in their interest to downplay it and make it seem like it was not a big deal, or the Iranians didn't, you know, really accomplish anything. And a lot of people online, of course, are pointing out, look, just because Iran didn't massacre a bunch of civilians, that doesn't mean that it wasn't a harsh and effective response. And I mean, the way that the Israelis, you know, they just murder civilians regularly, and that's how they try to establish deterrence, is by just murdering civilians. Right. A lot of people are pointing out that, look, Iran has a different definition of deterrence. It doesn't involve murdering innocent people. Right. But, you know, again, the videos, as you mentioned, you can't hide that there were a ton of impacts, and the Iron Dome was basically nowhere to be found. And these hypersonic missiles, I mean, the Iron Dome was really established for, like, shooting down, like, Hamas rockets coming out of Gaza. The Iron Dome wasn't designed to be able to shoot down hypersonic rockets coming. Right. You know,
well, there's also the Arrow. There's also the Arrow defense system that was being used as well.
But all these systems, even the best ones, hypersonic missiles are just really hard to shoot down. And it turns out that Iran can really bypass all the Israel's missile defenses. So that's very significant. The other thing is there's been some satellite imagery coming out, like in the mainstream press, and it's interesting that those are showing some places of, like, the Nevatim Air Base and other air bases that were hit, but they're really limited. They're only showing like a small portion of the bases, you know. So those small portions that we can see from the satellite imagery, there's some damage, and you can see how accurate the Iranian missiles were, but you can't really tell how extensive the damage was, or whether really
they don't want to give a very detailed picture of what the damage is like. That's why we've seen, like, so much fluctuation in the extent of the damage in the media. And the Israeli Army radio initially admitted to damage, but said no main infrastructure was harmed and only buildings and aircraft maintenance workshops were destroyed. Meanwhile, you have the other extreme, people saying that, like, warplanes were completely destroyed and aircraft hangars were destroyed. So, you know, we don't really know, but just to, like, remind our viewers, the IRGC said that they targeted 3 military bases: Nevatim, which houses F-35 aircraft; Netzarim, which houses F-15 jets used in the assassination of Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah; and the Tel Nof base near Tel Aviv with the Fatah ballistic missiles. And a Hezbollah source told Al Jazeera that the Glilot base was also targeted. So the scale of the missile interception, even with the help of Jordan, who was shooting down missiles, and with the help of France and Britain and God knows who, I forget now, they still were not able to thwart this attack as they, you know, would have liked to. And there is damage, okay, and we don't know. But the Hezbollah and the Iranians are saying that the bases were hit directly, especially the air bases. The extent is up for debate, okay? But the Iranians, you know, the foreign minister, the day of the operation, said, we exercise self-defense under Article 51, targeting solely military and security sites in charge of genocide in Gaza and Lebanon. And this was, again, in response to the assassination of their IRGC Quds Force commander and of Ismail Haniyeh, who was assassinated on 31 July in Tehran, and of course Sayyid Hassan Nasrallah, who was assassinated on Friday in Dahye. So they said, we have been exercising tremendous restraint for almost 2 months to give room for a ceasefire in Gaza before deciding to do this. And if the Israelis want to respond to our response, they will face a crushing response, and they will see further destruction of their infrastructure. So people thought they weren't going to respond. And another thing, you have to kill civilians or even soldiers to harm Israel or its image. I mean, we see all this blood, and we want blood for blood, right? This is the sentiment online. Oh, that operation happened? Well, how many died? It's always in the comment section. How many died? If they didn't die, then they didn't do anything. What are these fireworks? Well, they're not fireworks. Damage was done. That's a fact. And it was unprecedented. And I don't think they're very happy about it. So anyone who's still saying this is a theatrical, I don't know what. And then there's dispute over whether or not they informed them in advance or not. Because so they're claiming they didn't. Regardless. I don't know. I mean, what do you think the response will look like? What have you read, or what have you seen so far? Because they are saying, oh, it's going to be strong, but it's not going to lead to an all-out war. Oh, and the Americans are saying we can't give them permission or deny them permission. We can only advise them.
Yeah, I mean, with the Americans, the main thing to remember is that publicly they always will say that, oh, we're advising restraint and we don't want the Israelis to, escalate. But of course, behind the scenes, and they're giving the green light, and there have been reports in Politico and elsewhere that really, like Amos Hochstein, Antony Blinken, these people are actually encouraging the Israelis to respond. I mean, again, in my view, there's no real difference between the U.S. and the Israeli governments. They're essentially functioning as one entity. And as many people now point out, I mean, Amos Hochstein, who now it's clear has a lot of influence in the administration, not to mention Antony Blinken, who has close ties to Israel, of course. But Hochstein is an Israeli citizen, served in the Israeli military. So this kind of business of whether the U.S. is restraining Israel or not, it's really like one entity. But of course, for public relations reasons, they have to do different messaging for the U.S. public versus for the Israeli public. But again, what's interesting is that when Iran hit Israel in April, Israel didn't really respond to that. They supposedly sent some drones into Iran, but the response of Israel was extremely weak. So I don't know if that is an indicator that the Israelis will not really have the guts to do a big response.
I think this time they're on such a high that they will.
But we'll see. But I think from the Iranian perspective, the biggest thing is that I think this missile strike was about twice as big as the one in April. And so, again, there was that same criticism that Iran in April, that it was choreographed response and it didn't really accomplish anything. And sure, whatever. But again, they did prove back in April that they could bypass Israeli missile defense and hit targets. And they proved they proved the same this time, but on a larger scale. But it's clear that Iran has not even come close to using its entire capabilities or its best missiles or its largest quantities of missiles in one attack. So the Iranians are just basically saying, like, hey, we're going to show you we can do damage. And then the second time, they're going to show we can do more damage. And so obviously it should be pretty clear that by now, if there's a third time, they will do even a lot more damage than they did this time. And Iran, they're just going kind of step by step. They're not showing all their capabilities at once, but it's pretty clear that Iranians can do a lot more, and they're just the more the Israelis escalate, they're just going to keep escalating themselves. So the strike was, of course,
Iran's parliament speaker. It's Ghalibaf. He's the speaker of the Iranian Shura Council. He said yesterday that if the Zionist entity tries to attack Iran, it will quickly disappear and collapse. And he warned Washington to tighten the collar of its rabid dog, Israel, so that it does not harm itself and cause trouble for its owner. Now, the thing is, when Iran says that it exercised restraint and to give room for a ceasefire, that wasn't Iran acting by itself. That was probably because it was requested by other members of the resistance axis to hold back and to not take any actions to give way for a ceasefire, even though we all knew there would be no ceasefire. So it's not like it's not like Hamas and Hezbollah were begging Iran to respond and Iran was refusing because it wanted to go, talk about, the nuclear deal or whatever. Iran was most probably requested to hold back just so that, these talks could be given a chance. And now that we've reached where we are now, Iran carries out its response, and it's a combined response for more than one assassination. So I think they're serious now about, and again, okay, some people were doubting, but, back in April, they changed the equation. They normalized striking Israel, and it was the first time in history. They're not going to go back and never strike Israel again if they did back in April. Things have changed now. And of course this was a decisive, and now there will definitely be a response from Iran. Is Israel going to target the nuclear facilities or the oil facilities? What's Israel going to do? How measured is it going to be? We don't know, and of course I don't think the U.S. has any control over that. So the thing is, there's a lot of talk, about. Again, the failure of this operation. I mean, I see the opposite. And of course, the Israelis saying, oh, not a single Israeli died, right? But one Palestinian was killed. And this was in Ariha, in Jericho, on the border with Jordan. Well, that's because Jordan's shooting down missiles. Iran was not targeting Jericho. So this is great for Israel's framing. Iran kills Sunni Muslims. Oh, look, Iran didn't even kill a single Jew or a Jewish citizen. Iran is killing Sunni Arabs. So look, world, Iran doesn't stand with Palestine. All it does is target Sunni towns and villages and kill Sunnis. I highly doubt that would have happened. God rest his soul. I highly doubt that would have happened if the Jordanian king hadn't been shooting down these missiles. So
yeah, and what's interesting is that obviously Israel and the United States in the past, that's the card that they constantly play, is the sectarianism, and they're always trying to foment Sunni and Shia sectarianism and hatred, and that was their main strategy in the covert war on Syria that began in 2011. Yep. The United States and Israel and Saudi Arabia and Qatar supporting these Salafi terrorist groups, Jabhat al-Nusra, ISIS, the Free Army. Mm-hmm. But I don't think it's working this time, because people see how craven the Arab governments are. And again, that's exemplified by Jordan's participation, actually shooting down missiles on behalf of Israel. And it's interesting, there's a guy, like a Salafist activist named Dili Hussein. If people remember from the Syria war, he was a big advocate of the so-called Syrian revolution and, did a lot of media work promoting the war against the Syrian government and Bashar al-Assad's government. And even he on Twitter posted something today that I saw where he was praising Iran. And he said the Arab regimes, they're doing nothing under the table, behind the scenes. They're working with Israel. And even he, who is like one of the biggest regime change proponents or advocates in Syria, he was like, on his podcast, he would basically have like these Jabhat al-Nusra type people on there. And he was basically praising Iran. So again, I think that this effort to like play the sectarian card that Israel and the United States constantly do to divide the Arab and the Islamic world, it's kind of falling on deaf ears this time around.
Well, yeah, and the important thing to point out with that is many of the supporters of the so-called Syrian revolution are Zionists, but many are not. They hate, they hate Shias and they hate Iran and they hate Hezbollah, but they also hate Israel, or so they claim. So they have to commend Hezbollah and Iran if Iran is taking action against Israel, if they really are, despite being, against the Syrian government, if they really are anti-Zionist and, for the liberation of Palestine and so on and so forth. So we are seeing this, we're seeing a lot of people who say, I don't like Iran, but good on Iran, etc. It's not going to work like before. The only time you're going to see the sectarian stuff is because it's paid. It's paid, by the media, in Saudi media, in Emirati media. Western media, Israeli media. This is when we see it. When a guy who is pretending to be a sheikh, but is has been convicted in Lebanon for spying for Israel, comes out on Al Arabiya Saudi TV and says, "Oh, Iran sold Hassan Nasrallah out," and this is because the Al Arabiya and these kinds of people who are paid by Israel are actually coordinating with the Israeli army. And so this kind of stuff where it's like, yes, Iran did this, Iran did that, Iran sold Hezbollah out. Look, it never replied to Haniyeh. Look, Iran's the one who killed Nasrallah. Iran's the one who killed Haniyeh. Without having any idea of what's going on behind the scenes, how any of this works, Iran would be shooting itself in the foot by selling Hezbollah out. So even if you don't like Iran, claiming or speculating that Iran sold Hezbollah out makes no sense. And a lot of people who may have had issues before with Iran are going to see now that it's completely outrageous to stand against the resistance, or the only ones standing up against genocide and against this axis and against this new Middle East project. Like all the people who hate the Houthis, they can't not commend the Houthis. We saw that within Yemen even, So yeah, it's not going to work like it used to work back during Syria, or even in Lebanon back in the day. Not like before, no.
And I don't know if you have any more comments on the Iranian strikes, but I wonder if we should talk a bit more about the ground operation in southern Lebanon more. Obviously the Israelis have many advantages, which we've seen in the past few weeks with the pager attack and the walkie-talkie attacks, which were really sinister and brutal. And then also with just their ability to assassinate so many Hezbollah commanders in such a short period of time, and obviously killing Nasrallah was a huge blow. But just Fuad Shukr and all these other commanders and all the experience that they have. So from a technological and a surveillance and an intelligence perspective, the Israelis have huge advantages, but Hezbollah has always been saying that, where they have the advantage is if Israel dares to come into southern Lebanon. And I think it's interesting that we saw that so quickly. I mean, is Israeli coming just, a few kilometers inside the borders, and they're suffering heavy losses. I mean, this is where Hezbollah has the advantage. And a lot of people, that I talked to right after Nasrallah was assassinated, they were saying the Hezbollah is done for. They're over. They're done. It's like they still have missile capabilities in the south. They still have maybe 40,000 men, highly trained, highly motivated, who are ready for an Israeli invasion in the south. And that's where Israel has the disadvantage, is that they don't have the manpower. To do a massive invasion, to do a full-fledged occupation of the South, and they don't have the stomach for casualties. And so if they keep trying to come into the South and they're getting hit with 10 soldiers killed, 20 soldiers killed, 30 soldiers killed every couple of days, again, the Hezbollah, they have these precision-guided anti-tank missiles, cornets and things like this. I mean, they can target tanks from a couple kilometers away. Lebanon is a hilly terrain, so it's difficult for the Israelis to maneuver. I mean, again, they have drone support and airstrike support, but the Hezbollah fighters are going to be able to hit them from kilometers away with these anti-tank missiles. So, I think that's just something to point out, that this is where Hezbollah has the advantage. And again, all of the talk. I mean, it was devastating and brutal when we kept seeing these commanders getting assassinated left and right, and I don't want to downplay that. I mean, it's brutal, but again, Hezbollah is prepared for that. I mean, all these guys, they're prepared to be martyred, as they say, and they're prepared to be replaced. And even the Washington Post had an interesting comment saying that for all the major positions that Hezbollah has for their commanders, there's usually up to 5 replacements ready. And a lot of the younger commanders, they could even end up being more skilled and more proficient because they have a better grasp of technology that a lot of this older generation, didn't have because they're just older and things have changed a lot technology wise. So again, those are just things that are important to remember. Is if Israel keeps pushing with a ground invasion or incursion or whatever they want to call it, this is where Hezbollah has the advantage, and So I think that's important to remember.
It is, and another thing is that, by the way, like to our viewers, this isn't the Radwan elite force that is confronting the invasion. These are ordinary Hezbollah fighters. The Radwan force is an offensive force, not a defensive force. So, for anyone who's seeing anything about the Israelis claiming that they're face to face with Radwan or anything like that. And also, yes, no one is here to downplay what happened with these assassinations, with the pager terror attacks, with the walkie-talkies, with Hassan Nasrallah being assassinated. It's huge, and it's a huge blow, but it does not really have impact on the battlefield. And it strengthens the resolve, really. There's so much to say. I think it's very early now, so we're not here to be like, oh, they can't come in and they'll never come in. And no, they might. Well, they might advance. And we're waiting to see what's going to happen. One thing that is for sure is that the Israelis are going to take extremely heavy losses, and you're going to see a lot of it being covered up, and a lot of military censorship. And you're going to see that the numbers they're admitting to are larger than the numbers they were admitting to in Gaza, which is, of course, very different as terrain goes. And that the numbers are actually much higher than that. But even what they will admit to will be higher than what they've been admitting to in Gaza. So, we'll come out with more bites in the coming days. We're still at the start of this. It's been, I think, 3 days of this invasion having begun. And you're going to see, the Israeli army come out and say, we found this complex, we destroyed this, we found these weapons and destroyed them, we found these tunnels. I mean, I think it's early, and let's wait to see what happens. So I think that, we can wrap that up for today. And we'll try to come on and, give you guys some more updates and like a better impression of the big picture over here when we can. So thank you for listening, and William, thank you for joining me at such a tense time. And guys, make sure to keep up with us. We're doing our best to cover what we can, considering our capabilities. Please, subscribe to our Telegram and to our YouTube, and consider becoming a Patreon member, and keep, support us as much as you can in this time, because, we are also trying to cover and bring you what we can in a war situation here, and everyone around us has been directly affected. So if you can help, we are grateful. If not, make sure to just support us and, watch us and follow us. So thank you, and we will end it there for today.